So as you would have seen in the last video, I'm up to the next bit of the S600. I just picked up this rear end from Bathurst and it's pretty muddy and dirty, so I'm here at the car wash, going to give it a clean and then start stripping it down, having a look at it. Okay, so I've got the axle back on the bench now. My car wash degreasing wasn't as successful as I expected, but we'll start pulling it apart. First thing, I guess, worked from the outside in. Now I get to unseize another set of brake drums, so I'll start working on that. You reckon these brake lines are still good to use, or? Cool, so I've just spent like 10 minutes trying to knock these off already, and I've had enough of seized drums. I've already got, I think, 6 spare ones that I've taken off. I'm going to try and take the diff center out instead. I'm going to take all the easy bits apart to try and break this down to smaller pieces, just because it's really big and heavy rolling around on the bench at the moment. And as Sean just pointed out to me, this won't actually come out until I get the axles out. So I'm going to undo the chain cases and get the chain case off, and then the axles will come out, and then we'll have a bunch of smaller bits to work on instead of a huge piece to work on. All the bolts are out, so I assume this just comes off now. I don't actually have any idea how this comes apart. I'm assuming this has some kind of like sealant or something in it holding it together, maybe. Yeah, it does. Oh, it's making good squelchy sounds. Oh, that's good. It's not oil coming out of it, it's got water pouring out of it. Actually, that's probably just from having it at the car wash. Good mix of oil and water coming out. My rear end's done a head gasket. Once this thing is apart, it's going to be much easier to work on instead of having...
It's globbing out of the
Oh no. So it looks like the bolt for the chain tensioner actually slid all the way through from this side. But now it should come all the way out, I think. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, it's chunky in there. Oh, gross. Wow. Oh, that's the tensioner. Chain tensioner is still good. So that's our chain drive section with the axle removed. I can see that the rubber tension roller here is all perished and fallen apart. And this is actually bits of the tensioner roller flying around inside there. They just go bad over the 50 years, so I'll have to replace them, make new ones, but I'll pull the other side apart and get it cleaned up, and then we'll have a closer look at all the bits and pieces and see what we can see. So instead of unseizing this drum, because it's been a pain on the last couple I've done, I'm hoping I can get the bearing and the hub and everything apart, and then be able to get to the shoes from the back and unseize them. I don't know how this comes apart, so I'm just going to start undoing bolts and see how far I get. Apparently this is really tight. I'm going to try and twist it with the breaker bar, because that's either going to unseize the drum or undo the bolt. I can feel myself headbutting like, buh! Okay, so I had it on the ground and I ended up like jumping on it to get it to go, but it's popped. The nut came undone before the brake drum freed up, but we'll see how this comes apart. I have no idea what actually drives this. It should have like a spline or something. And then this one here should slide out, I guess. Oh yeah, there we go. Huh, that wasn't actually held in by anything. It's not really a good spot to sort of encourage it out by. Huh, look at that. I guess I just wasn't pulling it perfectly straight, because even just winding this by hand, it's moving now. So this one obviously has to come up as well, the bottom one, otherwise the chain's not going to want to budge. But the bottom one doesn't seem to want to move. It seems like it's maybe a tighter fit inside its bearing. There's definitely no like fitting or anything on the back here. There's no bolt or anything, it has to just pull straight out. I wish the chain had a split link on it so I could get it off, but it doesn't look like it has one. There's more bits of seals and stuff in there floating around. So I've got this top gear to just slide off nicely, but the bottom one here, I can't get it to slide off. So I've been trying to get this bottom one out. The top one I managed to get it to just slide off and then get it out of the chain. But this bottom one, out only turns that far and it's stuck, so the bearing in it's stuffed. And this spline that goes in there, it's all rusty down inside there, so obviously water's got into it. That's probably why the bearing's seized. It's probably also why it's so hard to get this to come out. This is such a thin wall that I can't like grab it with anything because it'll crush it. Yeah, the other thing is, it'd be nice if I get a bearing puller on it, but because the chain is such a tight fit around there, I can't get the chain off it. So I have to pull it off with the chain still on it, which means I've got nothing to grab it by. It has to just be stuck in a bearing. I don't know how else they could have held it in there. I found a smaller slide hammer that I have. Maybe you'll be able to get 2 of the legs under it and use like a, instead of using 3, just use 2 of them. Ooh, that's a bit dodgy. I might try it. I don't want to hit it too hard pulling it off the chain, but we'll give it a go. This really shouldn't be that hard to pull out. It should just be a like light sort of interference fit with the bearing. I had a look at one of my open chain cases that I have, and that's like already been pulled apart by someone else, and yeah, it's just a bearing in there. There's no clips or anything, so try to pull it out. Hopefully you don't damage the chain. That's supposed to just slide out. I'm hitting that pretty hard and it's not moving. It's not damaging the chain, which is good, but it's moved a little bit. Can I get the chain off it now? Not quite. I really don't like having to put this much force through the chain, but I don't really have a choice, I don't think. What would be good actually is a cable tie. I'm going to cable tie the chain so it stays like wrapped around the sprocket. Try and make it a bit easier to get the bearing puller onto it. The hardest bit about using bearing pullers is just managing the stupid dangly legs not going where you want them to go. Yes. One less chain to deal with. Okay, I'm trying to avoid using the slide hammer. I've got that main bit out now. What I can do now is drop a piece of material down the hole there so that I've got something to push off with the bearing puller, and I can use the normal bearing puller then. This one's different than the slide hammer puller in that because I got like a nut to do up, I can sort of feel it how it's going, and you can tell if it's doing anything like super bad or if it feels like it's starting to go or if it's not going. Or now that I say that, it doesn't seem like it wants to actually fit under the gear though. And there we go. Yeah, this is a fairly tight press fit, and there we go. She rusty. Glad that came off eventually. You can see, same as all the other ones, the shoes were just rusted to the inside of the drum. Okay, so I've got the drum off and got the brake shoes out and the slave cylinders. I won't be fixing this one up. If you're in one of my older videos, I've fixed up a few of these already out of my spares pile. So if you want to see a more in-depth video on making this look like it's brand new, then have a look at my older video. But what I want to do next is try and get this wheel bearing off. So I've already taken the big nut off, and as far as I know, this should just pop off now. But it's not the first time I've said something should just do something, and then it does everything except that one thing. A lot of the time I forget that I own this, but it's a very useful tool. One thing that is annoying is because this is a 5-stud car, the 3 legs don't evenly space into the 5 bits, so it's going to be... This one's like only just holding on by a corner here, but it might still work. Or it'll shoot me in the eye, one of the two. Oh, it's very tight. So, what you can do is there's pressure on this now, it's constantly pulling. Go around and tap it, and a lot of the time, well, I don't know, 50% of the time I reckon, sort of go around and tap it a bit, and then just the shock it'll pop, because this is holding the pressure, and the tapping helps it crack. Oh man, surely this is going to go in a second. Everything on this is very stuck. So used to working on all my like 90s Hondas, where pretty much everything just undoes because the car's new, whereas working on these older cars is everything is a battle. But the nice thing is, once I undo this once, then it's all put together fresh. None of this stuff should ever be that hard to get apart again. Until it sits in like a barn or a field for the next 20 years, and the next person buys it and tries to do this. And they can deal with it all again. Don't like the angle that this one's sitting at because it's not gripping on square. Surprised it hasn't popped yet. So I've got these 4 nuts off. I think maybe the whole assembly might knock out from the back now. I sort of feel like I'm working with a live grenade here because this thing's got a lot of pressure on it. At any moment it might just like shoot out, but we'll see what happens. Okay, maybe it doesn't come apart like that. These bolts, you can see where I've undone them. I was hoping the whole bearing is like this shaft from there all the way through to here, like has to be one long shaft. So it's either the whole thing's got to go this way or the whole thing's got to go that way. But which of the 2 ways is what I'm trying to figure out. So there's another guy on YouTube that I've been watching doing up an S600, J&H Classics. I found a bit in one of his videos. He just does like silent mechanic videos, which is really good to actually see what's going on. His wheel bearing, when he pulls it off, it just comes off. That's it. So I don't know what I'm doing, but obviously it's something wrong. His chain case isn't even full of mystery goop like mine. It's so clean compared to this mess. How professional is this? Putting my phone in the video. I know this is how you come off, so just come off. Oh man, it's really hurting my hand. I need the other big spanner. I can feel something here is going to break. Probably the bearing puller, because it's a cheap one, but it was free, so can't complain. Was that it? No, it was the bearing puller fell off. Come on. Look at the legs are falling off it separately. So, looking at his videos some more, there's not a bearing in there, it's a spline, which obviously should have known, because this is a driven wheel, it's not a free spinning wheel like a front wheel. And given that his spline is rusty, that means my spline is probably made from rust. So I think I'm just going to keep pulling it with the bearing puller. I've been dripping anti-rust stuff down there as I go as well, but I think just continued bearing puller pulling. I've got the big Strangest bearing puller now. See if this will get it. My camera's running out of battery, so I hope we get it before I run out of battery. Otherwise you're not going to see this bit. How has it not moved yet? There's so much force on that. Oh man, I can't do that up much tighter. I reckon I might leave it overnight with this on there done up super tight, and then hopefully when I get here tomorrow it'll be over there somewhere, maybe. I've decided that I don't want to wait till tomorrow. I just want it to come off. This is the part where you get like an oxyacetylene set, start heating it up, if I had an oxyacetylene set. Something's giving, whether this is going, oh it is, haha, it's moving, it's starting to slide up. I was like, either the thread is stripping out on this, which is why it's covered in anti-seize, because they normally destroy themselves, but, oh, it's starting to slide. Oh, man, my hands are killing me. Yeah, it's moved like 5mm. Cool, progress. Oh, it's getting easier to turn now. There we go. Yeah, it was just rusted on there. Now this plate should just knock off. Should just knock off, like everything else that should just knock off. The best bit about doing all this is, after it's all finished, I get to do the other side. The thing I really want to avoid is I want to avoid bending this. This one is probably the rustiest one I have out of all of them, so I guess if I was going to bend one, this would be the one I want to bend, but I'd rather just not bend any of them. It's very hard to use my camera without getting it all oily. There we go. So this has actually got a bearing in it. Yeah, okay, so this retains the bearing, but it doesn't actually like have the bearing in it. That's interesting. It's got a like that's a normal ball bearing. Normally cars run tapered roller bearings for wheel bearings, but not this apparently. So that means this has no tapered roller bearings in the rear end. Actually, it'll have in the diff center, but it has no tapered roller bearings in any of this stuff, which is pretty odd for a car from any era, I think. Well, we'll knock this shaft out and then everything can go in the parts washer. We'll get this half out of the way so we don't start mixing up left and right bits, and also I don't have enough bench space to pull apart two of these at once. Now I reckon this should just knock out. Ready? Course it. Oh wait. One S600 stub shaft. So that's all the bits knocked out of this. There's one bearing in there still, but I'll get that out later. I'm just going to clean everything in the parts washer from this half. So I will be back in a minute with one greasy hand. So you can see the inside of the chain case actually cleaned up really nicely. The outside, however, still looks like this. I don't know why this mud is so like stuck, but even like scraping it doesn't really get it off. But I'm going to be sandblasting this to clean it up anyway. So that looks good. I've cleaned up the shafts and the gears and everything, that looks good. I've got to go to the shops to get bearings and seals and stuff. This video is getting a bit long, but the last thing I wanted to look at is this, which is the tensioner, so I'll pull that out next. So this is fairly impressive. I've cleaned the tensioner up. Normally these have rubber on them, and the thing that happens is the rubber gets old and falls off, and that's normally when you find them. This one looks like the rubber's gotten old and fallen off, and then the person's just continued to drive it for a long time. So this is from the chain sliding down the bracket in the middle. And then this has like, the chain's actually worn into it. So I'm surprised at how good condition the chain's in, because the chain doesn't have a mark on it, but this thing's pretty stuffed looking. I'm going to remake this anyway because they all fall apart, and I could drill these spot welds out and put a new centerpiece in it, but I do have two of these in another axle that aren't anywhere near as bad. So I'm going to fix these ones up instead. You can see this one's got a lot more of the rubber roller on it. Normally there's little lumps for the chain to go in, like a little sprocket, and you can see it's covered in rubber. So that one's on this spare rear end that I have in the pile, but yeah, I'm going to use those ones because the ones that came with that axle are pretty dead. Okay, so I think I'm going to end that video there. We've got the first half of it apart, got the chain section of it apart. These will be sandblasted and cleaned up, and then I'll get new bearings and stuff from the shop, new seals, put it back together. But in the meantime, I'm going to start pulling the next step apart, and that'll probably be the next video you see. So make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you actually think it's good, because YouTube's like, hey, everyone thumbs up this video, it must be good. Other people can see it as well. Actually makes a big difference. Same with subscribing and stuff. So hopefully you liked the video. I'll see everybody on the next video.